The power. Imagine waking up one morning and realizing that the balance of the world has flipped. Not gradually, not politically, but biologically. In The Power, teenage girls across the globe suddenly develop a new organ, the skein, that lets them generate electricity with their bodies. Sparks at first, lightning later, enough to stun, burn, or kill. A twist of evolution that transfers physical dominance from men to women in a matter of months. Alderman takes that premise and pushes it past the point of comfort. Because this isn't a story about liberation, it's a story about what power does to people, no matter who holds it. The world fractures fast. Governments panic. Religious leaders rewrite scripture overnight. Militias form. Women who were once afraid to walk at night now walk fearlessly, and sometimes violently. Men who once controlled society become its vulnerable class. The shift doesn't create equality. It creates reversal, and reversal becomes revenge. The story follows 4 characters. Roxy, the daughter of a crime boss with enough raw voltage to light a city. Tunde, a journalist documenting the global collapse as women rise. Allie, a runaway who becomes a prophet known as Mother Eve. Margot, a politician who weaponizes empowerment to secure control. What makes The Power so dark is how quickly idealism curdles. Righteous anger mutates into cruelty. Protection turns into domination. And the line between justice and tyranny dissolves. Alderman doesn't romanticize the shift. She exposes how violence is never about gender. It's about opportunity. As the skein spreads to adult women and entire nations fall under new regimes, the world becomes unrecognizable. Tunde's travel diaries turn from journalism to survival notes. Roxy's strength becomes a commodity in global warfare. Allie's religion becomes a cult. Margot's political rise becomes a warning. The story is framed as a historical document written thousands of years in the future by a male author, in a world where women have held power for millennia. The editor, a woman, mocks his research, dismisses his theories, and questions whether men were ever truly oppressed. Alderman isn't predicting a future. She's holding up a mirror, showing that systems of abuse are not tied to chromosomes. They're tied to whoever believes they deserve control. If strength determines morality, what happens when strength changes sides? Vox. Waking up one morning and finding that your words have been counted for you. Not metaphorically, literally. In Vox, every woman in America is fitted with a metal bracelet that tracks their speech. The limit is 100 words per day. Speak the 100 first, and the device shocks you. Hard. Enough to drop you to your knees. Enough to train you like an animal. This is not a dystopia of war or monsters. It's a dystopia of silence, of enforced quiet, of entire lives shrinking down to whispers. Before the Pure Movement took power, Dr. Jean McClellan was a brilliant neurolinguist. Now she's a prisoner in her own home, rationing sentences like oxygen. Words are currency. Conversations are strategy. The dinner table becomes a battlefield where one wrong phrase means pain. So here's what makes Vox truly chilling. The absence of sound. No screaming or warning. Just the gradual realization that you can't breathe anymore. Women lose their jobs, their books, their emails. Girls in school aren't allowed to learn to read beyond a basic level. Language, the thing that shapes thought, is carved down until minds flatten. Dreams shrink, opinions die. Jean begins to realize something chilling. You don't need guns to control a population. You just need them to stop talking. But then the regime makes a mistake. They need Jean's expertise for a government project. They remove her counter, temporarily giving her voice back. And that's when she sees how deep the conspiracy goes. The Pure Movement wasn't built on religion or tradition. It was built on a weapon, linguistic suppression. If you erase language, you erase resistance. You erase identity. Dalcher uses neuroscience as horror. The novel explores how language literally wires the brain, how cutting vocabulary shrinks cognition, how silence becomes a cage built from the inside out. But Jean isn't just fighting a political system. She's fighting time, because the regime has new plans for girls. They're designing a generation that won't merely be silent. They'll be incapable of rebellion. A generation raised without words for independence, anger, autonomy. The brilliance of Vox is that it doesn't show a world destroyed by force. It shows a world destroyed by compliance, step by step, restriction by restriction, until silence feels normal. Jean realizes something every viewer feels deep in their bones. When your voice is taken, the next thing stolen is your mind. You understand the truth Dalcher is writing beneath the plot. Authoritarianism doesn't need violence to win. It only needs your silence. The machine stops. Long before the internet, long before smartphones, long before we locked ourselves indoors staring at glowing screens, E.M. Forster predicted all of it, and then he took it to its logical, terrifying end. The machine stops begins in a world where humanity has retreated underground. People live in isolated hexagonal rooms, never touching, never traveling, never lifting a finger. Every need, food, communication, entertainment, comfort, is delivered by a vast, omnipresent system known simply as the machine. You don't call friends. You summon them through screens. You don't go outside. The idea disgusts you. You don't think. The machine thinks for you. It's not dystopia. Its convenience evolved into religion. People don't worship gods anymore. They worship the network that keeps them alive. At the center of the story is Vashti, a woman who believes the machine can do no wrong. To her, human interaction is unnecessary, even dangerous. But her son, Kuno, is different. He feels trapped. He wants fresh air. He wants sky. He wants life without filters or interfaces. And when he escapes to the surface, illegally, he discovers something unthinkable. The Earth isn't dead. It's recovering. Nature is healing while humanity has locked itself inside a self-made tomb. When Kuno returns, his crime isn't curiosity. It's independence. The machine forbids it, and slowly, cracks begin to appear. Malfunctions, delays. A system built to be perfect begins to cough and shudder like an aging god. But instead of questioning it, people pray harder. They cling tighter. They recite machine mantras as if worship can fix what maintenance no longer can. That's the darkest part of Forster's story. Not the machine itself, but humanity's surrender. When the system finally collapses, society crumbles instantly. People don't know how to walk, how to touch, how to breathe without instruction. They built a god out of convenience and forgot how to live. The machine stops, and so do they. What makes the machine stop so haunting is how accurate it feels now. Written in 1909, it predicts algorithmic control, social media echo chambers, virtual meetings, screen addiction, and the fear of real human contact. Forster didn't just imagine a future, he diagnosed one. This isn't a story about technology taking over. It's about what happens when humans willingly trade freedom for comfort, when we choose isolation because it's easier than connection, when the world outside becomes an inconvenience instead of a home. The Dispossessed. Some dystopias scream. The Dispossessed whispers, and somehow that's darker. Because Le Guin doesn't show you a world of tyrants and brutality. She shows you a world built on ideals, and how even ideals can become prisons. The novel follows Shevek, a physicist born on Anaris, a barren moon that broke away from the capitalist planet Urus generations ago. Anaris is supposed to be a utopia. No money, no laws, no property. Everyone equal. Everyone free. But Shevek grows up realizing a quiet truth. Even a paradise can suffocate you if it fears change. On Anaris, conformity becomes its own form of tyranny. The society claims no one owns anything, but everyone feels entitled to your life, your labor, your loyalty, your thoughts. Shevek's scientific theories threaten the status quo, so he becomes an outcast in a world that pretends not to have outcasts. Le Guin's horror is subtle. It's the horror of a community so committed to its ideology that it crushes individuality without ever admitting it. Desperate to finish his work, Shevek travels to Urus, the world Anaris abandoned. But if Anaris is a utopia warped by fear, Urus is a paradise rotting from within. Wealth glitters in the streets, but poverty festers in the alleys. The rich throw opulent parties, while soldiers gun down protesters outside. Freedom exists, but only for those who can afford it. Shevek becomes a mirror for both worlds. On Urus, he sees beauty twisted by greed. On Anaris, he remembers love twisted by ideology. The darkness of the dispossessed lies in the realization that no system, capitalism or anarchism, can save you from human nature. Wherever people live, power grows, and power corrupts. Le Guin writes with surgical calmness, exposing how societies collapse not through violence, but through moral erosion. Urus is decadent, seductive, dangerous. Anares is austere, idealistic, suffocating. Both believe they're right. Both are wrong. Shevek spends the novel trying to build a bridge between two worlds that can't admit they need each other. The tragedy is that Shevek's breakthrough, a theory that could unite the universe, is born from isolation, betrayal, and disillusionment. His genius comes at the cost of belonging nowhere. A man too radical for home, too honest for empire, too hopeful for either world to fully accept. The Dispossessed feels like a philosophical void, a reminder that utopia and dystopia aren't opposites. They're neighbors sharing the same wall. Every ideal becomes a cage if you're not allowed to question it. Le Guin's darkest message is simple. You can escape a corrupt world. You cannot escape human nature. Anthem, a future so stripped of individuality that the word I has been erased from the language. A world where people don't have names, only numbers. Where your job, your thoughts, even your desires are assigned to you by a council that claims to know what's best for everyone. Equality 7-2521, our narrator, lives in this world like a ghost inside his own life. He's smarter than he's allowed to be, more curious than he's supposed to feel. But curiosity is a sin. Intelligence is a betrayal. Wanting anything for yourself is the ultimate crime. What makes Anthem chilling isn't the brutality, it's the calm. The way people quietly accept a life without choice, without love, without identity. They speak in we, not I. They don't understand the concept of individuality because the vocabulary to express it no longer exists. Language is the cage, but then equality finds something he was never meant to touch, a hidden tunnel from the ancient world, filled with relics of a forgotten past. There, in secret, he learns. He experiments. He discovers electricity, a forbidden spark in a world built on candles and fear. When he tries to share it, believing he's offering a gift, society treats it as treason. He isn't thanked. He's hunted. Because a man who can create something on his own is a threat. A man who thinks independently is a virus. His escape into the uncharted forest becomes a rebirth, and when he finally finds the forbidden word, I, it lands like a revelation. A single syllable powerful enough to dismantle an entire regime. The real chill isn't the regime, it's how easily people learn to erase themselves, how silence becomes devotion. She imagines a world where people willingly extinguish their own identity for the comfort of belonging, a world where the destruction of the self becomes a form of worship. When Equality renames himself Prometheus, it's not a triumphant moment. It's a reminder of how fragile freedom is, how easily language can erase identity, how quickly collective ideology can turn into collective erasure. Anthem isn't about rebellion with guns or armies. It's about rebellion with a pronoun, a single thought, a single self. And the terrifying idea that the most dangerous thing a person can say in a world built on obedience is, I am. Rebecca begins like a romance. A shy, nameless young woman marries the wealthy widower Maxim de Winter and moves into his grand estate, Manderley. But from the moment she arrives, it becomes clear she hasn't replaced Maxim's first wife. She's competing with her. Rebecca. Beautiful, brilliant, fearless, dead, but everywhere. Her name echoes through the halls. Her monogram is stitched into sheets, carved into hairbrushes, still hanging in closets like she's only stepped out for a moment. And every person in Manderley, servants, guests, even Maxime, speaks of her with reverence or fear. The new Mrs. De Winter isn't living her own life. She's living in someone else's shadow. The true horror of Rebecca is psychological. The narrator's insecurity becomes a noose. She starts imagining Rebecca in every reflection, every whisper, every gust of sea wind. But the real terror lives in Mrs. Danvers, Rebecca's devoted housekeeper. She treats the new bride like an intruder. She keeps Rebecca's old room preserved like a shrine, and she whispers poison into the narrator's ear, convincing her she'll never compare. Du Maurier turns jealousy into a specter. Manderley itself becomes a mind trap, beautiful on the outside, rotting underneath. The novel feels like watching someone drown slowly, in silence, while the world applauds Rebecca's memory. Then comes the twist. Rebecca wasn't a saint. She was cruel, manipulative, and dangerous. The perfect woman everyone worshipped never existed. She crafted an illusion, one so powerful that it still controls the living after she's gone. Maxime didn't adore her. He feared her. And her death wasn't an accident. Suddenly the ghost story flips. Rebecca isn't haunting Manderley because she was loved, but because she was monstrous. Her power isn't supernatural. It's psychological domination. Even in death, she controls the story, the marriage, the house, and the narrator's identity. Manderley burns. The estate that guarded Rebecca's memory is reduced to ash, but the narrator realizes something chilling. Even without the house, without the things Rebecca touched, without her name written on the walls, she still feels her. That's how trauma works. It doesn't need objects, it needs wounds. The Reapers are the angels. The Reapers are the angels is the opposite. It's quiet. Too quiet. A world already long dead. A girl already shaped by its ruin. Her name is Temple, 15 years old, born after the fall of civilization, raised among the walking dead. She doesn't remember the old world. She doesn't miss it. The apocalypse isn't tragedy to her. It's nature. She accepts the zombies the way someone accepts storms or winter, as something that simply is. Temple isn't scared. She's tired, wise beyond her age, haunted by guilt she never escapes. She's a drifter moving through the South, carrying both a knife and a sense of fate. Like a wanderer out of myth who knows death is always one step behind her, yet keeps walking anyway. What Belle captures isn't survival, it's grace. Temple isn't fighting to live. She's looking for meaning in a world that doesn't offer it. Every ruined town she passes feels like a ghost of a memory she never had. Churches filled with dust, highways claimed by vines, houses collapsing under the weight of silence. And then there's Moses Todd, the man who becomes her shadow. Not a zombie, not a monster, a human, and her executioner. After Temple kills his brother in a moment of self-defense, Moses vows to hunt her down. Their relationship becomes the novel's heartbeat. Part chase, part confession, part twisted form of respect. Belle writes their dynamic like a grim fairy tale, hunter and hunted, bound not by hatred but destiny. The zombies, called slugs, are background noise. The real horror is people, broken communities, corrupt enclaves trying to rebuild the old world with cruelty instead of wisdom, and individuals so traumatized they resemble the undead more than the monsters do. Temple carries a terrible secret, a sin from her past that defined her entire life. Belle never treats her like a child. She's a tragic hero, walking through the ashes of America like a wandering saint marked for death. Her kindness is dangerous. Her violence is reluctant. Her hope is fragile. The story feels biblical. Temple's journey becomes a kind of pilgrimage toward redemption she knows she'll never fully reach. When Moses Todd finally catches her, it isn't revenge that fills the scene. It's mercy. A mercy that feels like absolution. Whoever Fights Monsters. Before Netflix documentaries and true crime podcasts, there was Robert K. Ressler, the FBI agent who walked into the minds of killers and never fully walked back out. Whoever Fights Monsters isn't just a memoir. It's the blueprint for modern criminal profiling. Ressler coined the term serial killer. He built the behavioral science unit. He interviewed the men most people would rather pretend don't exist: Bundy, Dahmer, Manson, Kemper, and through it all, he documented one brutal truth. To understand monsters, you have to let them speak. The book takes you into prisons where the air feels thick with violence. Ressler sits across from men who murdered for pleasure, for rage, for reasons even they can't explain. And his job wasn't to judge them. It was to map the architecture of their minds, to see the patterns, the triggers, the childhood scars that calcified into homicidal obsession. That's what makes this book so dark. Ressler doesn't paint killers as supernatural forces. He shows them as broken humans shaped by neglect, trauma, fantasy, and opportunity. Evil isn't a myth. It's a process, one that grows slowly, quietly, and often invisibly until it finally erupts. One of the book's most disturbing insights is how ordinary killers can seem. Ressler describes conversations where murderers talk about their crimes with chilling calm, as if reading grocery lists. Their voice is steady, their eyes clear, their memories vivid. They aren't haunted. We are. But the cost of listening is enormous. Ressler slowly realizes that immersing himself in darkness comes with a price. He begins to see shadows where there shouldn't be shadows. Normal people start to look like suspects. The world becomes a series of warning signs, and that's the quiet horror of the book. The moment Ressler understands, he's absorbing pieces of the men he studies. He writes about going home and noticing he can no longer relax. His mind runs crime scenes on playgrounds, parking lots, neighborhoods. He becomes hyper-aware of danger, because once you've heard enough confessions, you know how thin the line between safety and violence really is. The title comes from Nietzsche. Whoever fights monsters should see to it that in the process he does not become a monster. Ressler lived that warning. Every interview, every crime scene, every photograph carved something out of him. The book isn't just about serial killers. It's about the psychological erosion that comes from confronting evil without a mask. Ressler wanted to understand monsters so the world could stop them, but in doing so, he stepped into their darkness and carried some of it with him.